Hello and welcome to the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell, Taylor Smith. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Pretty good.
Right in. We're going to go right into news and notes, where we're taking a closer look at the biggest news of the week. This week, we're starting with the NHL. Wild first round of the playoffs would be a dramatic understatement. Perhaps nothing crazier than the end of the San Jose Sharks series win over the Vegas Golden Knights. Rick, that was a roller coaster of emotions just watching that game.
Oh, it was, first of all, the Sharks winning the way they won was crazy. The penalty call that changed the whole game. I hate referees, okay? I really do. This goes way back to my teenage days. I just can't stand referees. They blew that call. It changed the entire landscape of the game. Vegas would have won easily if they didn't get that 5-minute penalty. It was terrible. Really. First of all, Vegas has nobody to blame but themselves for losing Game 6. But even with that said, we all picked Vegas to win, and it was shocking. It still was one of the more entertaining, emotional hockey games I've seen in a while. And that's what we like as sports fans, especially if we don't have a dogfight, as they say. But with that said, I'm still shocked about the outcome of that game. And, I was just reading how two of those referees from that game won't be officiated in the second round. I wonder why.
The penalty was bad. It wasn't a good call. I was rooting for Vegas just because we all picked them. But giving up 4 goals in the span of 5 minutes, even if you're down a man the whole time, I've never seen that. Not that the 5-minute major is a super common thing, but that was incredible. But when Vegas tied the game with under a minute left, I'm thinking, okay, good, they got this. They have the momentum going into overtime. San Jose might be feeling a little doubt now after their little flurry. And then, it was back and forth the whole time. But Vegas, like Rick said, has no one to blame but themselves, really. Just choking away that lead. 3-0 on the road, Game 7, third period, about halfway through. I've never seen anything like that. There's nothing more to say. It was just incredible.
It's just really tough. It's because, and to Rick's point too, it's, they were up 3-1 in the series. They could have won Game 5 in San Jose. They could have won Game 6 at home, which they really had a lot of opportunities to, because that one also went to extra time. And they had something like 60 shots on Martin Jones in that game. And they could have just allowed less than 4 power play goals on that 5-minute major. But one thing that I think is interesting, I've seen it put out on Twitter too, it's the idea that game misconducts in a lot of other sports, including in NCAA men's hockey in the U.S. And college football as well, if there's a game misconduct and ejection because of a hit, it's reviewed, because they want to make sure they get it right. We've all seen in college football, because that's watched all over the place in the U.S., that, you see a headshot, a hit to the head, it's a 15-yard penalty, and so-and-so has been disqualified. We're going to review this play. And then they look at it, and then they either say that, yeah, it was a headshot, he's out, or they go, actually, he hit him in the shoulder, or in this case, in the chest. And so there is no ejection. And I also think, though, that the one lingering thing from that, if you wanted to say that the referees, like you said, Vegas tied the game after giving up 4 on the power play, they forced overtime. The difference is that penalty still made, is that Cody Eakin, who had scored earlier in the game, was not available for overtime. Vegas's forward depth, they were 9 deep in that game, and then they became 8 deep for the overtime period, just when you're talking about scoring forwards. So it's interesting. Maybe the NHL this offseason will decide to add review for game misconducts, just to see if that's the case. Even if it didn't wipe off the major, if it just kept Eakin on the bench and available for the late third period and then overtime, who knows? But we'll see how that goes over the summer. The first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs done in the NBA. No surprises and no real competition in any of those series. Taylor, what did you learn from the way the East went in round one that you can use for future rounds, if anything?
There was really nothing. The chalk held. Milwaukee swept. The Celtics swept. I thought the Celtics series might be a little more competitive because Indiana was decent, but they were missing their best player. He's been out for months, Victor Oladipo, so that wasn't really surprising. Brooklyn and Orlando each won game one on the road, but then they lost each of the next four in pretty lopsided fashion. The one thing to watch, I think, is Joel Embiid's health. Philly basically goes as he goes. If he's not going to be available for some of these games, then obviously they're in trouble. But in general, the first round was just a waste of time. Like, they could have just simulated those games and just gone to round two. The West has been way more compelling. But as far as the East, not much of a surprise.
The Eastern Conference was boring. It was boring the first round. Let's just say it was boring. It sucked. And I'm not going to say it sucked as bad as those refs from the hockey game, but it was bad. With that said, I expect the fireworks to pick up a little bit in the second round, and I'm hoping we get more action and more competitive series. And I think Boston is the team to watch out of the four, because I just feel like they just were in cruise control that whole first round, and they didn't really get tested, and we didn't really see them play their best basketball. So I'm excited to see what happens in the second round with the Celtics and with Joel Embiid, because if he's not, at full health, 76ers are in trouble.
Yeah, because the Sixers can be dangerous if he can stay healthy, because they've got a really good starting five when they've got all five in there. But, yeah, I mean, honestly, with the first round of the Eastern Conference, I just kind of refreshed the NBA.com page, and it was more, on every couple of days, it was more surprised to see a win for the lower seeds, like you guys were talking about with than anything else. It was just a matter of time, whether it was going to be 4 games or 5 games. You knew the outcome of those series, especially with the injury to Oladipo in that one. So maybe we'll get something interesting in round 2 for the Eastern Conference in the NBA. Just maybe they should play with, they should go to what the NHL used to do, where it's just 1 to 16. Get rid of East and West. The SEC had to do that in, I want to say, baseball or basketball, is one or the other, where they had to get rid of divisions because it was just so one-sided. And it was maybe the NBA should just do that, because the West is just interesting and the East is just,
Garbage.
A few good teams and a whole bunch of trash. So that, I don't know. It would be a little bit of a radical realignment, but if they want to have interesting first rounds across the board, there you go.
People always cite travel. Like, they travel for the first round in baseball, and teams play on different coasts in, National League, American League. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. That would make more. It would be more interesting to see the Clippers take on a team like, anybody in the East, than it would be to see the Clippers just get destroyed by Golden State, probably. And it's that they've won 2 games as we're sitting here, and just to see sweep after sweep and gentlemen's sweeps across the Eastern Conference. So who knows? But we're going to go to entertainment really quick, because we got some records falling on the TV game show Jeopardy. As a sports bettor, James Holzhauer has already topped $1 million in winnings, little Dr. Evil, before he played in his 15th game, which he did last night. He won nearly $119,000 on Tuesday night's episode alone. That's not even his best night. How in danger are Ken Jennings records here? And Rick, please make sure to state your response in the form of a question.
Oh, shoot. You grouped them together. If you went individual records, I could say yes, one will be broken, one will be not. First of all, Ken Jennings was a robot. He was a cyborg. He was a machine. To win 74 straight games was incredible. Holzhauer is phenomenal, but he's very aggressive, and that aggressiveness is eventually going to catch him when he misses one of his daily doubles or Final Jeopardy. I believe he'll catch the winnings, because he's already close to halfway, and he's played like a fifth of the amount of games that Jennings played to get 2.5 million. Here's the thing also. when we're talking about these winnings and stuff, we're only talking about regular gameplay. Because if you included the tournaments, Jennings was up over 3.2 million, and Rudder was about 4.5 million, and he holds the record for the most winnings of all time. But in regular gameplay, I think James is going to catch him. I think he'll pass him because of his style. He has a unique style with Jeopardy, and he mentioned in interviews that he was trying to do something different that applied to just him. And he's taken his sports betting and gambling background and used that, his principles, which he doesn't share all of his principles, but you can see his aggressiveness. You can see how he sets up picking questions or answers and trying to find the daily double. And then when he hits that daily double, he bets really big. And when he gets to Final Jeopardy, he's so far ahead, he doesn't even have to bid. And yet he bids so much where it's just astronomical if he wins. And that's why he's got like the top 7 all-time winnings already. That's half the amount of games he's been winning. Like, it's incredible what he's done. Even Ken Jennings has given him a shout out and said, you know, I've always wanted to see someone bet like this. But the key is this: he will get the winnings mark based on, you know, what he's doing, his averages. But he's not going to win 75 games. We're never going to see that again. He hasn't even cracked 20 yet. There's only been one other player that's hit 20, and that was I can't think of her name.
Julia Collins.
Excuse me?
Julia Collins.
Thank you. Collins. Other than that, there's only 2 people of all time that's hit 20 or more. It's exciting to watch. It's made Jeopardy fun to watch again. The fact he's got a sports betting background, gambling background, makes it exciting for us because, you know, that's what we do. That's what we root for. I'm excited for it. Let's just hope, you know, he starts breaking some of these, at least one of these records. But watch out for his aggressive play. I think it's going to catch him here before he gets close to Jennings' all-time 74 win mark.
Yeah, the over on 74.5 wins for this guy is at plus 500, which doesn't seem like enough. I feel like those odds should be longer. Under 74.5 is minus 1,000. He's only at 16 right now, like you said. He's got a long way to go. I can't see him getting that far. 74 is just that's 54 more than anyone else has ever done in a row. Like, I really can't see that happening again. So it seems like the under on 74.5 is a pretty easy bet.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, he's only like 20% of the way there at that point. I mean, it's what he's done to this point. He'd have to do 4 more times in a row without a hiccup in order to get to that number. I mean, yeah, I agree with you guys. I think that just because of the sheer amount that he wins every time he wins, he'll break Jennings' the money record. But yeah, as far as the all-time like the win streak record goes, someone who's that aggressive, I don't think can go that many in a row without one getting him. And that's really all that it'll take.
I thought it was really cool how he said when he won the the 109,000 that he won in the first less than 10 games. He said he picked that specific number because that was his daughter's birthday. And I thought that was really cool because he also said that he told people that was his goal. And everybody laughed at him because it was like 30,000+ more than the record by Craig previously set in 2010. So it's incredible what he's doing. It's exciting to watch. You know, he's going 40 for 40 or 40 for 41 on answers and stuff. That's crazy. But even James, you know, gives credit and a shout out to like Jennings, because Jennings, you know, and then there's some other prop bets, you know, real quickly that talk about matching up Jennings versus Holzhauser and stuff. And I think Jennings would win head to head. I think he's smarter. The only way James would win is if he got the daily doubles and he could do his aggressive play. But Jennings is a cyborg. He was a machine. He wasn't human. I still don't think he's human.
I do think, though, that might be the reason that you could say that Jennings would be a little bit of an underdog if they went head-to-head. Jennings might be the smarter individual as far as the wealth of knowledge, and over the course of however many head-to-heads, he would probably the knowledge would come out and would show. But I don't know that he plays aggressively enough where, unless Jennings' strategy was to just pick off the daily doubles as early in every round as possible to prevent that strategy from being implemented, I don't know how you stop it, because as soon as he gets one right and he gets on that roll, that's just, he'll then find the daily double and he'll bet 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, and that's it. And unless you run into that one in however many it takes him to actually hit that wall and miss on those big bets, I mean, that's that. So, I mean, I agree with you that I think Jennings is the, he will have answered more questions successfully over the life of his Jeopardy run. But Holzhauer, just the way that he plays, I think head-to-head, if it's one shot, I think Holzhauer would win it. If it's like, if they did like a best-of-7 series, if we're going like they're going NHL playoff style, forgetting referees, I think Jennings might take it at that point. But
I would, and I mentioned this in my article, they just talk about Holzhauer, say that name fast 5 times. They talk about James and Jennings. They always leave out Rudder. And Rudder would have, who knows how far he would have gone. He played in where you could win 5 games and then you were done. But he dominated tournament play. He won 5 tournaments. He even beat Jennings head-to-head in a tournament. Okay, so when we're talking about the Mount Rushmore of Jeopardy players, Rudder has to be mentioned up there. And he has, in my opinion, if they went head-to-head, I would make him the favorite. He's already beat Jennings. He holds the record for the most winnings. He dominated the tournaments. We're not just talking regular tournaments. We're talking about tournaments of champions. He took on the best of the best. So I hope one day we get some prop bets that include him in there. But Jeopardy's cool again.
And that's what it comes down to.
What is cool again? There you go.
There you go. They're pleasant. Well, now it's time for Where's Your Money Going, which is all about what we're most excited about in the coming days. Taylor, we're going to start with you. What are you keeping an eye on? What are you most excited to see and play?
So the Celtics and Bucks is a series that I think they might have a lot of public money coming in on Boston, just because the Celtics are one of those bandwagon-y teams that everyone loves, like the Lakers or the Yankees or whoever. And the Bucks, while they're the favorite, it's still the Milwaukee Bucks, and it's still not a team that many people are going to be trusting in the playoffs, even though they've looked dominant so far the entire season. So if public money starts coming in on Boston and it bets the line down a bit, I'm still going to be taking Milwaukee there. So I'm excited for that series. I think Milwaukee will just crush them. I think that could be a 5-game series at most. So I'm thinking that series is a way to get some decent edge.
This week for me, I mean, without going too deep into all the fight sports we got going on, there's 5 big events. And it's hard for me to pick which event that I think is going to be the best or which one I think will have the best for betting value, because there's so many different fights and stuff. So I'm going to skip that for this section, and I'm going to the Geico 500, Talladega Super Speedway, because if you're not first, you're last. And
make it big.
And I'm going with the NASCAR prop bet. And this prop bet is Ricky Stenhouse versus Martin Truex Jr. in a head-to-head battle. One of my favorite things each week, if you check out my NASCAR betting, my betting guides or previews for races, I always like to throw in some head-to-head matchups because these are my favorite NASCAR prop bets. And you basically just pick which driver is going to have the best result for this, for any particular race. In this particular matchup, Ricky Stenhouse has the best average finish out of any active driver right now at a little above 10. Martin Truex Jr., even though he won the championship a couple years ago, he has struggled at Talladega to win a race. Stenhouse won a race a couple years ago at Talladega. Truex has not. They're head-to-head. The odds are even at minus 115 each last time I saw it. They might change by the time the race comes. Truex average finish is around 20th. Stenhouse around 10th or 10. With that said, I really think Stenhouse is going to do well this weekend. He has raced well at Talladega over the last couple of years. He's figured it out. Unfortunately, Truex still struggles there. Truex has bad luck. He usually gets caught up in the big one, which, by the way, if you don't know what the big one is, it's an exciting experience to watch. 15 to 20 NASCAR cars just crashing, balls of flame and fires, and woo, it's exciting. With that said, I'm taking Stenhouse over Truex. That is where my money's going.
For me, when I'm looking at it, as far as most exciting from a betting perspective goes, the fact that the 76ers are underdogs in their series is intriguing to me, because especially if you're going on a game-by-game situation and you can check to see if Embiid is healthy enough to play and is expected to be able to contribute with 30 minutes or more. I mean, for me, the Sixers, if you could do that, I'm cool with that. That would be most exciting to me, most intriguing to me is if you're going game by game and the Sixers stay healthy. That's an interesting matchup to me, especially once the series gets back to Philadelphia. To be able to pick the Sixers, to be able to go, is Embiid playing? Yes. All right. I'm putting my money there. And if he's not, then steer clear. That, for me, is what is going to be the most interesting. Those NASCAR prop bets do sound kind of cool. And we're both in the Eastern Conference. I think the NHL, which would normally be the most exciting one and might produce the most exciting games, is just so unbelievably unpredictable that to try to go game by game, it's just tossing it in the air.
Yeah, just throw your money in the furnace instead. It's the same outcome.
Bring your money back to NASCAR.
Let's get into spread and butter, a closer look at some of the weekend's biggest games and their betting spread. Lots of playoff action coming up this weekend. We're going to go to the NBA for this, and we're going to focus entirely on round 2 because we're taping this on Thursday afternoon. We can't know betting lines for the Nuggets or Spurs series against Portland, or the Warriors, or technically the Clippers still alive series against Houston, playing Golden State for losing on Wednesday despite getting 45 points from Kevin Durant, for us not being able to break down that one. Anyway, in the East, the 76ers and the Raptors open things up on Saturday. Spread set at 5.5 points. Toronto, the favorite. Both sides pay out at -110. Taylor, which side are you taking?
Like you were saying, it all depends on Joel Embiid. He's had his bulky knee the whole first round. He's been questionable pretty much every day. He missed a game against Brooklyn. Excuse me. I'm inclined to take Toronto here. So Embiid averaged 26.5 points a game in the 4 meetings with Toronto this season. But it's worth noting that all 4 came before Marc Gasol was traded to Toronto. He's old, but he's still among the best defensive centers in the league. Not that anyone can really slow down Embiid, but I would still side with Toronto, assuming Embiid plays. But Philly as an underdog is pretty interesting. I would still take Toronto -5.5 at home. I just think this is a different Raptors team than the failures we've seen over the last few years. So I'm taking Toronto there.
I can't in good conscience take Toronto after how bad they choked last year and after dropping a home game to Orlando this year. I think if Joel Embiid doesn't play, I think that spread will go up a lot more. So I'm actually going to take that. I still think the 76ers are going to keep the game close. I think they'll challenge Toronto. And I like Philadelphia not only to pull out the win, but to cover the spread.
I'm going to Philly on this one. As I said earlier, if Embiid is playing, I like the Sixers and to win just about any game. It is a game 1. It is in Toronto, so you get that little bit of home court, but 5.5 points. So if I can have the Sixers to win or the Sixers to lose by 4 or 5, I'm cool with that, especially if Embiid does play in that game. On Sunday, it's going to be the Celtics and the Bucks. Milwaukee, the favorites in the Eastern Conference, favored in this game as well. Line set at an even 8 points, no half point here. Both teams at -110. Rick, are you going for the Bucks to cover? Are you taking Boston +8, or are you thinking push?
Ooh, that is tough. Milwaukee has been impressive all season long. They have the MVP, in my opinion, this year. And like I was saying, I don't know if we've seen Boston's best game yet. It was like they were on cruise control against the Pacers. This is a tough one. I'm going to go with the Celtics in the points. I think Milwaukee will win the game, but I'm going to take Celtics with the points here. I just feel that, they have the experience where Milwaukee doesn't really have the experience. I feel that Boston has more depth when everybody's healthy, and I just think I think they're going to come out strong this game 1, and I believe they'll at least cover. 8 points is a good amount. I like that for Boston. I'm wearing the green for Boston, so here we go.
You could also be wearing green for Milwaukee.
That's true.
No.
Especially because you got
8
Blue on there,
points.
too.
Yeah, 8 points is a lot, but Milwaukee is just so dominant. 1 and 2, the Celtics went against the Bucks during the regular season. I don't know if Boston's turned it on in the playoffs. They were a disappointment all year. It's impressive they swept Indiana, but Indiana, that's a team that never really had any upside to begin with. The Bucks just look like a team. I think they could be listed as the championship favorites right now with the way Golden State looks against the Clippers. I've just been believing in Milwaukee all year since they've shown that they've taken that step forward. Great coaching. Obviously, they have the best player in the series, Giannis.
Antetokounmpo.
I think just Milwaukee's on a mission. I'd take them to cover 8 at home, even though it's pretty big.
Yeah, I'm going Milwaukee too, even with that 8-point spread. It's their first home game or their first round 2 game of any kind in 18 years. Antetokounmpo is just, an outstanding player. I think that they are going to be they are the team to beat, and I think that that's going to start with a game 1 win for them. I do agree that Boston is an intriguing pick if Milwaukee were to have a little second round jitters, but I think Milwaukee, especially in game 1, they're going to have that, and they should win by at least 8-10 points or so in this game. So that's where I would be going as well. Well, we always love looking at these types of bets. It's time for Give Me Props. We picked out a handful of prop bets to go over this week. We're sticking with the NBA to start. These odds are, again, based on Thursday afternoon. We're going to start in the East, where we already know all 4 teams involved. To win the East, Milwaukee plus 105, Toronto is plus 230, Philadelphia plus 500, Boston plus 575. Taylor, which of these wagers do you find the most intriguing to become the Eastern Conference champs?
Philadelphia plus 500, like you guys were saying, they have the talent to do it. I'm just kind of concerned, 1, about Embiid, and 2, about their depth. Once you get past the starting 5, they have pretty much nobody you can trust. I think that depth over the course of a long series is ultimately going to come back to haunt them. I've been writing about Toronto all year. Even before the season, I remember doing shows with Rick where we talked up the Raptors. So plus 230 there's a pretty appealing number. But Milwaukee, like we were saying, has just been so dominant, and they're going to have the best player no matter who they face in the next round. Plus 105 still fairly favorable. They haven't had a lot of playoff success, which is a bit of a red flag for me, but it's not like the other teams here have either. Boston made the Eastern Conference Finals. Milwaukee at plus 105 just seems like the safe bet. If you want a little more upside, I'd take Toronto plus 230.
I'm never going to bet on Toronto. Never. To me, they're the San Jose Sharks of the NBA. Not taking them. I'm not going with Milwaukee either because I just, until I see them be able to progress further into the playoffs, have more success in the playoffs with this group of players, I can't take them either. It's either Philly or Boston. I'm going to go with Boston. I still think they have a tremendous amount of depth when healthy. I still think they have plenty of experience. They have a good coach. They have good defense. And I think in the playoffs, that's what really matters. And I believe they're going to pull off the upset for this series with Milwaukee. And then if they can play Philadelphia again or even Toronto, I think they would win that series. Give me Boston. Boston.
That'd be interesting. I like Taylor was saying, the safe bet, the safe pick is Milwaukee. Plus 105 is better odds than you're going to see in the West, which we'll get to in a minute. But there isn't a lot really to, it's almost 1-to-1. Philadelphia to me is the most intriguing. It's essentially betting on Embiid's health and a little bit of luck in the conference finals. Like you guys were saying, 3 of these 4 teams have never really had postseason success, at least not in the last decade, longer. So, Milwaukee's in the second round for the first time in 18 years. Toronto doesn't do well in the playoffs. Philadelphia, it's been a bit for them. I'm trying to even think when the last time that they would have been truly deep would have been. And then
Allen Iverson.
Yeah, 2001. Yeah,
maybe there was a year since then, a random one. But yeah, so you're talking about AI's era. So any of those 3 are going to have kind of that shot to finally just break their own glass ceiling that they've set for themselves. Boston, it's an interesting one at 575, but I'd go Philly and just kind of hope that Embiid stays healthy long enough for that to pay out, and for I'd be interested to see a Philadelphia matchup in the championship with either team from the other matchup. I think that it would be a good series if Embiid is healthy, and that's kind of where I'd go. I'd go small bet, but I'd go Philly because you're talking about a plus 500 payout. It's cool by me. In the West, as we're recording this, there are 6 teams still active in the playoffs. Golden State, the heavy favorites to win everything. They're minus 250 to win the West, even though as we're recording this, they still have yet to win their first round series. Behind them is Houston at plus 330, Denver at plus 1,000, Portland at plus 1,300, San Antonio plus 3,300, and Los Angeles, long shots at plus 15,000. To make this interesting, I'm going to ask the question this way. Which of these teams that are not Golden State would you think stands the best chance of paying out to win the West? Rick, we're going to go to you first.
Well, if you put Golden State aside, the obvious answer is Houston, because most people are picking them to upset the Warriors this postseason and go on to the finals. Houston's built their team to beat Golden State. But you know what? I really like Portland's odds. I like their value. I think they have a great young team with some key players. They look good against Oklahoma. I think they'll look good in the next round. Charles Barkley picked them to go to the finals. I think they have a good chance in the West outside of Golden State. Since we're not allowed to mention the Warriors because that's who I would pick to win it all still. Houston would be the smart pick. Portland would be the best value.
I think that one half the brackets, just basically the consolation side, the Western Conference Finals is going to be Rockets Warriors in round 2, assuming Golden State doesn't, fart and fall down against the Clippers again. So Houston plus 330, I think I've been talking them up. I think they can beat Golden State. Like Rick said, they built their team to beat Golden State. Almost did it last year. They won 3 of 4 during the regular season against Golden State. Golden State will have home floor advantage, which is not ideal for Houston. But as we've seen with the Clippers, is home floor really an advantage for Golden State at all? So Houston plus 330, I think there's still a lot of upside in that bet. I think that's your easy money call. Portland, that Dame Lillard shot the other night was the most incredible playoff moment I've seen in a long time. But I kind of feel like that magic's going to run out. That team still got swept 1 year ago by New Orleans. Let's not forget that. So I don't trust whoever comes out of that second round series between Portland, San Antonio, or Denver. It's either Houston or Golden State. We can't mention Golden State. So Houston plus 330, I think that's pretty obviously the way to go.
I do agree with you on that, where, Houston's – if someone's going to take down Golden State, it's probably going to be Houston. The one thing that is interesting to me about Portland is that they're at plus 1,300. They're one of only 2 teams that have locked themselves into the second round at this point. They're one of only 2 teams in the West who have won 4 playoff games. And when we sat here a week ago and we were looking at the NHL, the Golden Knights were, more favorites to win the Stanley Cup than the 2 Eastern Conference teams that had advanced at that point, Columbus and the Islanders. And it was just weird to see that, to go, okay, it was, we all thought Vegas was still the favorite because of the path they would have had. But it's one of those things when you see a team that is that getting such long odds, that is one of only 2 of the 4 that will move on to have locked themselves into it that next round. It's a given that Portland is going to have a 7-game series to decide whether or not they go to the conference finals. As much as playing the Clippers with 2 opportunities to win that series should be, technically Golden State has not earned that right yet. Technically, when you're looking at the other, the Portland's future opponent too, you don't know which of them is going to be moving on, yet Denver has shorter odds than Portland does. And to me, that's interesting. I still don't think Portland's going to win the West, but I think that that's the most interesting thing, is that as far as value goes, is that you're talking about a team that has qualified for the second round that is plus 1,000 higher than the other team that has qualified for the second round. Taylor?
Plus you're getting, you have 3 teams that are plus 1,000 or higher. At least one of them is going to be in the conference finals. Like, we know this. They're going to be 1 step away from the finals. So
good point.
Obviously they have that inherent advantage over Houston or Golden State. So if you want to take a punt on a Denver or a San Antonio or Portland, it's not crazy just because, Kevin Durant could break both knees in game 6 and that changes everything, or James Harden could break his back or something. You never know. Portland plus 1,300 just out of randomness. I can see it. It makes sense from that point of view.
13-1 odds if you throw like a little bit, not like a full-size wager, whatever you would normally do, but
yeah,
just a little bit out there in addition to the team you actually think is going to win the West.
I mean, and it's just to win the conference. They could get slammed by Milwaukee or whoever in the finfinals, but they make the finals.
Or Boston. Yes, or Boston.
The worst team left, Boston Celtics.
Let's shift focus on futures bets for the NHL playoffs now. You can see my series-by-series breakdown of the conference semis on the Odds On Favorites YouTube page. I want to take a look a little farther ahead now, so let's talk Stanley Cup odds. As I was saying, we all sat here last week, said we'd take Vegas over Columbus for the Islanders when those 3 teams were betting favorites. That was obviously a whoops. Starting in the Eastern Conference, we've got Boston at plus 450, Columbus and the Islanders each at plus 600. Carolina, who just won Game 7 about 12 hours before we're recording this, hosting at plus 700. So which of those teams interests you the most? Taylor, we're going to start with you.
I mentioned last week that I was really impressed with the Islanders just dumping the Penguins out of the playoffs. Their whole home stadium thing still weirds me out, but I do like that at plus 600. Like you were saying earlier, there's no rhyme or reason for this at this point. Every single team that won its division lost in round 1. So this is a bunch of teams that weren't supposed to be here that are here now. So it's really just a crapshoot. I think Boston at plus 450, that's a team that obviously has some experience there. And Boston teams seem to be good at winning championships lately. So if you want to take it from that angle, plus 450 is fine, unless you're betting the Celtics. So I think Boston or the Islanders are the ones that are appealing. Columbus, I'm not sold on. Carolina, I thought was losing last night. But again, nothing has made sense so far. So we're just basically throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks.
With that said, I am going with Boston. I'm sticking with Boston. I like the Boston theme here. I like the Bruins. Well, I don't like the Bruins because I'm a Sabres fan, and, we had the rivalry for a long time growing up. However, out of the remaining 4 teams that you just mentioned, I like the Bruins. I like their experience. I like their defense. I like their goaltending. I just like what they have from top to bottom. I'm not sold on the Islanders. I'm not sold on Columbus. Carolina's hit or miss for me. So, with that logic of what I just said there, I'm going with the Bruins. I picked them last week to beat Toronto. I think they just have what it takes. This could be their year that they finally get back to the Stanley Cup.
So you were picking Boston because of experience, and I'm picking the Islanders because of experience. And there's a difference between the two, obviously. In Boston's case, the Bruins have been here before. They were actually in this round last year and lost to Tampa, who then lost to the Capitals. Boston's won Stanley Cups with the core that is still playing with the spoked B wheel on their chest. But the Islanders have something that Boston does not, and that is Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz is a guy who a year ago got the Washington Capitals past the Pittsburgh Penguins in the playoffs, something that had never happened before. Pittsburgh was always the team that took down Washington during the Ovechkin era. How many cups the Pittsburgh Penguins cost the Washington Capitals? It has to be at least a couple because of their meetings in the playoffs. Barry Trotz is the coach who, in Nashville, with little offense to really work with, had a Predators team that was consistently one of the better ones in the Western Conference. Not necessarily a Stanley Cup. They didn't make it to the Stanley Cup Finals with him, but they were consistently in the postseason, consistently doing better than their roster would have suggested. And with the Islanders, the team that lost their best player and their captain last summer, Barry Trotz is the addition that has made that team an improved team, having lost John Tavares, which is insane. It is also the only correct prediction I had for round 1 in the Eastern Conference, which is I didn't know it was going to be a sweep, but I believe that the Islanders are going to beat Pittsburgh, and I don't think that any of the other 3 teams that they could face will or could face in the Eastern Conference playoffs, I don't think that any of those are going to be better than beating Crosby, Malkin, Kessel, Murray, Letang, and the Penguins. I think that they've proven themselves to me. I now believe in the Islanders. I do also believe in Columbus, also at plus 600 after that first win of finally getting the monkey off their backs with the first series win. But I'd take the Islanders, and the difference maker for me is Barry Trotz, because there are three teams that have never really been here before, and one of them has a proven commodity, a proven winner behind the bench leading the way. I think Barry Trotz has been the difference maker all year. I think he's the reason the Islanders should be considered a good option to bet on in the Eastern Conference. We do want to move on to the West. We do want to also mention the betting odds for these teams just to win their conference is basically about half of what their Stanley Cup champion odds are. There's no Golden State Warriors to come in at minus 300 to kind of skew those results. But on the Western Conference side, the San Jose Sharks, currently the favorites out west, plus 500 to win the Cup, followed by St. Louis at plus 600, Colorado at plus 700, and the Stars rounding things out at plus 750. That is the longest odds of any NHL team to win the Stanley Cup that is still active. Starting with you, Rick, which team are you taking from the West?
As I stated last week, and I'll state again, I do not have any confidence in San Jose. Okay? The refs just handed them that series. All right? With that said, I will never bet on a Dallas team either. I'm surprised they made it this far, but I'm not going to bet on them. Out of the remaining two teams, I really like what Colorado did, how they just ran roughshod over Calgary. I didn't think they were going to go into Calgary and close out the series, and they did. You picked it, Drew. I didn't think it was going to happen. Colorado looks like a team that could be dangerous in the West, and I don't trust Dallas, and I will never trust San Jose. So give me Colorado.
One thing that seems to kind of be a rule of thumb with the NHL playoffs is that hot teams have a way of just storming their way through the whole thing. You don't really see that as much in the NBA or in the NFL, but in hockey, it seems like a team that has a hot goalie with decent star power, and if they're on a decent run, they can just bulldoze anybody. And I think Dallas is the team. They weren't in the playoffs for most of the season. They kind of had to storm back in the second half of the campaign. Ben Bishop's been awesome. They went to Nashville and took 2 of 3 from the Predators in a hostile environment. Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, those are proven stars at this level. The rookie head coach is kind of, a red flag potentially, but plus 750, nothing has made sense to this point. So why not just take the team with the longest odds and hope that it wins? Dallas against St. Louis, they took 2 of 3 or 3 of 4, from the Blues during the regular season. I think there's something to be said about riding the hot hand. So I think Dallas at plus 750, why not, I guess.
So everything that you used to describe Dallas, while accurate, Ben Bishop was lights out in that series. Their top line, Sagan, Radulov, just was outstanding in round one. But everything that you just described could also be used to describe the St. Louis Blues, who are their opponents this week. Jordan Bennington, as a rookie, has been insane. I think he basically his wins to loss ratio in the regular season was something like 4-1. He did go 1-2 against Dallas during the regular season. He wasn't the starting goalie in the first meeting, I believe, between the two teams. But he has been fantastic. The Blues, for me, going into this, were one of the favorites in the Western Conference. In like maybe the only thing I had correct all the way through in my NHL.com bracket challenge was I picked St. Louis to go to the Stanley Cup final before the playoffs started. By the way, the playoffs were so insane in round one that for the first time ever they opened up a second version that you started with round two. That as long as you're doing it before tonight's, as we're recording this first game, you were clear to do another new bracket. But I had St. Louis to win the Western Conference before the playoffs started. I think that Bennington is the hot hand goaltender. Like Bishop, it's been going on for a while. Bishop, I think, played a little under 50 games due to injury, health, something to that extent, but was insane during the regular season. Bennington did the same thing in the 25 or so games that he played once he became the starting goaltender. Playoffs-wise, they've basically been doing the same thing. St. Louis had to go into Winnipeg There was also that random stuff that came out like a night before the series started about Bennington. Some old tweets had surfaced. He was dealing with that and still beat the Jets, including games in Winnipeg. So I think that you're basically talking about two teams that accomplished the same thing in round one that now score off in round two. And St. Louis was the more believable team of the two before the playoffs started. So I would stick with St. Louis. They're at plus 600. It's not the longest odds. It's not the shortest odds. But I would pick St. Louis because I thought they're the only team that is left that I thought was realistically going to win the at least the Western Conference before this postseason started. So until they're out, I've got to stick with St. Louis because I actually had something that could still technically happen in my bracket.
Can't argue with that.
Everyone loves some easy money. So Taylor, what is your easy money lock of the week?
So the Indians are going down to Houston to take on the Astros for 4 games this weekend. The Astros own the Indians. They are 6-2 against them straight up in the last 8 games. They swept them in the first round of the playoffs last season. Garrett Cole, Colin McHugh, Brad Peacock, and Wade Miley will take the mound for the Astros in this series. I just think they have an inherent advantage in every aspect. Cleveland's not the same team they were last year, so I'd be betting the Astros in every single one of these games on the money line. They're the best team in baseball. The Indians are a little bit overrated by Vegas, so the easy money pick this week would be Houston against the Indians.
Rick, what's your easy money pick this week?
You know, I touched on it with NASCAR. I really thought that Ricky Stenhouse was where my money was heading, and I do think that's easy money also. I think there's another matchup in that race as well that I feel is easy money, even though some people might not think that. It would be Joey Logano over Kyle Busch in the head-to-head battle. And we'll talk about that a little bit more and when we talk about who I think is going to win that race. But for me, Logano's track record at Talladega is phenomenal over the last couple of years, and I believe he's going to easily beat Kyle Busch this weekend. So giving them to you both, either Stenhouse or Logano. Both of them are going to be easy money wins this weekend.
All right. Well, on the other end of that spectrum, it's clear as mud. What betting lines are we moving away from as fast as we can? What do we think has just way too much going on for it to possibly pay off? Taylor, we're going to start with you again.
We've kind of been hinting at it the whole time, but pretty much anything to do with the NHL playoffs is just wildly unpredictable. I'd be inclined to just take home teams and hope they can hold serve, but you know, it's been so random to this point that I wouldn't feel comfortable actually betting anything on any of them. So maybe take a few futures bets here and there, but as far as game by game, I'm a little nervous about actually trying to predict that.
Rick?
You know, there are several boxing matches or fights this weekend. There's some big events. Each event has world title fights on it, and it's going to be an exciting weekend for fight sports fans and stuff. But there's some of these main events and world title fights that these odds are a little bit too high in one way or the other. And I'm going to go with Showtime's boxing event this Saturday, where it's Easter versus Bartholomew in the for the main event for the world title. Easter's a big favorite. And although we just celebrated Easter last weekend, I don't think we're celebrating an Easter victory this weekend. I think his odds are too high. I think the odds makers are viewing him to be too the disparity in these odds are just too high compared. It was like minus 700 for Easter and like plus 580 or something for his opponent. I think that's crazy. Stay away from Easter until he can prove that he can take out an opponent an opponent with at this caliber that Rance Bartholomew is. Stay away from it.
This is still an old reference, but I don't care, and that's because it is time to show me the money lines, where we take a look ahead to this weekend's games and events and their current money lines. For this, we're starting with NASCAR. It's Talladega weekend.
Yes.
Woo! Woo! NASCAR.
Shake and bake. Yeah, sweet baby Jesus. I'm all jacked up on Mountain Dew.
Just makes you want to like get a tiger and climb into a car and go really, really fast.
Yes.
Brad Keselowski favored to win this race at plus 700, followed closely by Joey Logano plus 800, then Clint Boyer, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, and Kyle Busch all at plus 1,000. We're obviously recording this before qualifying on Saturday. But Rick, who do you like going into the Geico 500 on Sunday?
You know, Talladega, like I mentioned earlier, it's a tricky race, and not because it's like a road course where you have to navigate the turns and everything, or it's like Bristol where it's a short track and you have to be able to win the war of attrition. It's a tricky race because you have to survive the big wreck at the end of the race, and it happens just about every single year in both Talladega races and Daytona. They have their big crashes. At Talladega, it's known as the big one, like I mentioned earlier. And typically it collects at least a dozen cars, and you get fire, you get cars flying through the air. It's spectacular. With that said, for this race, I'm really leaning towards Joey Logano to win it. And here's why. Keselowski has been good this year. Logano's been good this year. They both have wins this year. Kyle Busch is leading everybody with the most wins. He's in first place in the standings and stuff. His teammate Denny Hamlin has 2 wins. The thing, though, is Busch has been terrible the last couple years at Talladega. Logano has not. Logano has been great. Logano's finished in the top 5 in at least 3 or 4 of the last Talladega races. He won a couple years ago. He's won 3 times at Talladega. Keselowski's won 5 times. That's why they're the 2 odds-on favorites. But for me, Logano has won at Daytona this year, or he finished well at Daytona this year. He's raced well at the super speedways, and I think he's going to take it this weekend. I like the way he's riding. He's the defending champion from last year for the whole Cup, and I just think he's going to take it this week. He's always the quiet assassin is what I call him. He's always finishing in the top 5. And if he can survive the big wreck, he'll have the car and the experience to win. I'm going with Logano. Dear sweet baby Jesus.
It's kind of like golf odds, Rick's favorite sport, golf, where even the favorites you're getting at pretty good odds, like plus 700 for Keselowski, plus 800 Logano. I'm not the biggest NASCAR fan or a fan at all, but I would just take Rick's advice.
Yes.
He certainly knows better than I do. So all in on Logano plus 800.
I'm siding with Rick.
Yes. You know, listen, I've been burned this season by Kevin Harvick. I would love to see him win his first race this year. He's one of the 5 odds-on favorites. He's tied there with Kyle Busch. But he just, until he wins this year, it's hard to go with him. And like I said earlier, Truex, the 2017 champion, his odds are bad. Kurt Busch could possibly finish better than his brother Kyle Busch. He has a better average finish. Like, Talladega is an exciting racetrack. And I'm telling you, it's either going to be Keselowski, Logano, and maybe even Clint Boyer. They're the odds-on favorites. They've all ran well at Talladega. I don't think you can go wrong with either of them, but I'm taking Logano.
Let's go to Bellator for a little MMA. Rory McDonald, a minus 375 favorite against John Fitch for Bellator 220. Fitch lists at plus 310. Rick, you're our resident combat sports aficionado as well. So who are you picking for this one?
I love it. NASCAR, MMA, all we're missing is WWE. Woo!
Next week.
So next week. It's the Red King, McDonald. Like, there's no doubt about it. If Fitch was back in his prime, he'd have a better chance. But at age 41, he's beyond his prime. He's going up against McDonald, who has looked phenomenal the last couple years since he's come to Bellator. Although he lost last year, he actually went up in weight to try and take on the middleweight champ to become one of the company's champs. With that said, McDonald will be patient, and once he gets Fitch down to the ground, he'll grind it out. Fitch's best shot at winning is a lucky haymaker, throwing some wild exchanges that catches him, or if he can some way, somehow pin McDonald in a clinch against the cage and beat up on him and win by points. Other than that, McDonald, he's younger, he's better, he has a better all-around game. He can beat you standing up, he can beat you on the ground. You got to go with the Red King. Rory McDonald.
It's kind of like the fights we talked about last week where the odds are so lopsided that even if you're betting on it, you're not really making much money on it. You know, you can take a shot on Fitch here at plus 310, but it's pretty unlikely to pay out. So, and same with minus 375, you're not making much money betting on that. So, you know, you can take McDonald to win, but it's not like it's a great betting option either way. So it just seems like a fight to steer clear from a betting perspective.
Who you picking?
What was that, Rick?
Who's he picking?
Rory McIlroy McDonald at minus 375.
The Red King.
All right, well, let's go back to the NHL. We talked about which teams we thought would make great picks for conference or Stanley Cup championship. We also said that we probably would try to steer clear of the individual games, especially early on in round two. But let's take a look at this weekend's games. We're talking about the Friday night games here, starting in the Western Conference. San Jose Sharks favored at minus 130. The wild card winning Calgary Flames extinguishing Colorado Avalanche are plus 110. Taylor, who you got for game one?
I'm going with Colorado here. They're the hotter team. San Jose, 3 straight wins against Vegas, super impressive, but they did have to play an overtime game on Wednesday night. That's just one day off, or Tuesday night, 2 days off between game 7 and game 1. There's going to be a fatigue factor there. Colorado's more well-rested. So I'll take the underdog plus 110 Colorado.
I agree. Not only do I think Colorado is going to win this game, I think they'll win the series, and I think they will go to the Stanley Cup, not Dallas and not St. Louis.
I'm going to just separate from you guys on this one. I think that when you're talking about rest for a team that caught fire and was not expected to necessarily, although I did say that I thought that Colorado was going to win in Calgary to close out the series. I did think going in that if there was a 1 seed to go down, Calgary was my contender for it. Little did I know all 4 of them would go down. But I've got the Sharks. I think that they are staying at home. The fans are going to be even more insane because they just got that extra time win, the overtime win in Game 7. They came off of a double OT win in Game 6 before that. And then, before that, I mean, basically the fan base is riding high. They're returning home again. And the team is riding high. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to travel. And I'm not convinced that when you're talking about a team like Colorado, that the time off is really beneficial for them. I think that they would have been better served if they had 4 or 5 days between the series instead of having a week or a week and a day or whatever that ended up being between series, because I think that's enough time for them to cool just a little bit. I think the Sharks end up winning Game 1. So we'll see a little different there between the 3 of us. The other Friday night game for the NHL in the Eastern Conference, it's the New York Islanders and the Carolina Hurricanes, latter of which just took down the Washington Capitals Wednesday night in a round 1 Game 7 in OT. Friday's money line has the Islanders at minus 130. It was actually a double OT. Money line has the Islanders at minus 130, the Hurricanes at plus 110. Taylor, back to you. Does the extra rest help give the Isles a Game 1 win here?
So it's basically the same situation. You have a team that's had a week plus off and then a team that's had 1 day off basically in the Hurricanes going into Barclays Center, I believe, for Game 1. So we said earlier that I like the Islanders to come out of the Eastern Conference. You said they had a good, an edge with the coach and everything like that. Rust could be a bit of a factor here, but tired legs after double overtime and 24 hours of rest is something that has to catch up with the team. Minus 130, it's still decent value on a favorite. We've mentioned that betting on individual games is pretty risky, but Islanders at home, they've looked great so far. I'll just ride the wave with them.
Yeah, sign me up for that too. I'm going to ride that wave also. I think they're the better team. Even with the amount of rest they have, I don't think that it's going to backfire on them because of the coach. I think he'll have them prepared. I like this matchup for the Islanders. I honestly think they can end up sweeping Carolina. So, if you do a little bit of shopping, you might be able to find that spread or that money line down a little bit for the Islanders. With that said, I think the Islanders win, and I think they win convincingly.
I also have New York, because it's essentially, like Taylor had said, this is a mirror to the other series, except the teams are in reverse positions. The Islanders, to me, were a legitimate threat. I thought they were going to be Pittsburgh, didn't think it was sweep. But I thought they were going to be Pittsburgh beforehand. I thought they were a good team, and they're proving it. They do have Barry Trotz as their coach. And I think that when you have that experienced team, the time off can help. Whereas with Carolina, they had to win back-to-backs and then immediately turn around. They also were on the road for Game 7. They were at home for Game 6. And they're going on the road to a different city, still in the Northeast, but they're going from D.C., maybe back to Carolina, and then up to New York, to go take on the Islanders. The Islanders have been able to practice. They were at home. They don't have to leave. They've got Barry Trotz. I think that the situation's reversed. I'd pick it like I picked the West, but I agree with you. This is a team that has Barry Trotz that did obviously do very well and caught fire in their series, but it wasn't a Cinderella tale. It wasn't this unbelievably unexpected series win for the Islanders. It was something that could have happened. People thought it might, and it did. And I think the time off helps them. So I think the Islanders will win Game 1 as well, especially being at home and especially with Carolina being road weary because they've been traveling so much in the last week. We're at that time of the podcast for my favorite segment that doesn't involve making Rick discuss golf. That is what we're just calling Whoops. This is our chance to come clean about something we projected, predicted, or pushed that we were really wrong about, and to explain ourselves. We were all wrong about the Golden Knights. We've discussed that already, so that's just a universal whoops from the three of us on that. And probably also the officials from Game 7, a whoops for them on that game there. Moving on, I'm going to go first to get us going here, and I'm going to stay with the NHL. It's all three Game 7s. Vegas, San Jose, Toronto, Boston, Washington, Carolina. I picked wrong on all of them. Vegas, we've already discussed, where there was assistance on that, or however that ended up going. I thought that Tavares was going to be the difference maker this year because Boston knocked out Toronto last year in similar fashion. But I thought there was a difference this year. There was not. Washington, Carolina, that's just amazing. Kudos to the Carolina Hurricanes for the run they've been on because they went into Washington, D.C., which is a really difficult place to play in, much less in the playoffs, or even more so in the playoffs. And they ended up they forced overtime, and they dominated in the extra time as well. That wasn't even close. It was like Washington hoping to get a fluke to get one in to score and end that game with a victory in overtime because Carolina just crushed them. So the NHL playoffs this year have been almost entirely unpredictable, and the Game 7s themselves, one of them with an assist from the officials perhaps, one of them because I bought into Toronto when I shouldn't have. Lesson learned, not picking the Raptors either. And Washington, Carolina, hey, congratulations to the bunch of jerks on that one because they proved me wrong and just about everybody else too, I think. Taylor, what is your whoops of the week this week?
My whoops involves the NBA playoffs. I live in the LA area, mostly a Laker town, occasional Clipper people. But I think just about everybody wrote off the Clippers during the season. Last year they traded Blake Griffin. People were like, okay, well, they're going to embrace a rebuild now. Paul's gone. Jordan's going to leave, etc. They came out this season, played really well, but then they traded their best player again at the trade deadline, Tobias Harris. And people thought again, oh, okay, well, they're punting on this season. They have hopes for, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, whoever as a free agent this summer. But they kept winning. They got into the playoffs. They snuck in as the number 8. People thought they would just be, 4-game fodder for Golden State. It looks that way. It's looked that way for most of the series, except for their crazy 31-point comeback in Game 2, and then last night's stunning, basically wire-to-wire win at Oracle in Game 5. Golden State, Houston is still the most likely outcome there, but I've been wrong about the Clippers all year long. I thought they were going to struggle to make the playoffs. I still think they're going to lose in this round, but I have a hard time just writing them off the way I did before, just based on how often they prove me wrong. So the Clippers are my oops of the season, basically, so far.
Rick, time to come clean.
I was all excited last week for the Amstel Gold Race. I said Alejandro Valverde had great betting value. Lance Armstrong and George Hincapie said that he had the great chance at winning the race. I believe them. Whoops. In fairness, though, for those who didn't see that amazing race, at the end of my preview for that article, I said the smart money is on Matthew Vanderpool or Julian Alaphilippe. Julian Alaphilippe had the lead up until about 600 meters left. Matthew Vanderpool pulled off what cycling pundits and riders and fans are saying is the greatest comeback ever in professional cycling. So it wasn't just like this year or last year. They're saying ever. He came from so far behind, dragged 4 riders with him all the way up, caught the 2 leaders, then out-sprinted the 2 leaders and 3 other people to pull off the win. Okay, I took Valverde. I thought he was going to have, this course was made for, or this race course was made for him. The hillies, he's good on the hills. He's got good speed for sprinting for a guy who can climb the mountains and stuff. He's experienced. He's a pro. Armstrong and Hincapie told me to take him. Whoops.
We're about to close the window here, so one last chance to get some things in. The closing line is set. We're looking for some final thoughts. Rick, what do you got?
My final thoughts are this, and I said it already. We have 5 big fight sports events this weekend. We have 3 tremendous boxing cards where there's world title fights on each card, 2 on DAZN, whatever you want to call them, and 1 on Showtime. And then we have a UFC fight night that has some explosive fights on the undercard. And we have Bellator, who has probably their best card in at least a year or so. For fight sports fans, this weekend's going to be great. For sports betting fans, this weekend's going to be great. Whatever the case may be, we've got a lot to choose from this weekend, and I'm pretty pumped for it. This is one of the better weekends we've had for fight sports in a long time.
Taylor, go for the closing line. Take us home strong.
So this weekend brings maybe the most exciting baseball development of the season, with Vlad Guerrero Jr. being called up by the Blue Jays tomorrow. Friday, he'll make his debut. He's the top prospect in baseball by a mile. He's like a Bryce Harper, Mike Trout level prospect, they say. Westgate has him listed at plus 125 to win American League Rookie of the Year this season. He should have been called up a year ago. The Blue Jays kept him down for service time BS, basically. So people expect him to come up and tear it up right away. If you're into betting on American League Rookie of the Year futures, Vlad at plus 125 is pretty appealing. It's not like any of the other rookies have really come out and lit it up, like Yusei Kikuchi and Eloy Jimenez. So it's a pretty wide open field. Plus 125 is still pretty decent. So go all in on Vlad Jr. for AL Rookie of the Year. And there's my final thought.
All right, and that'll do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. Check out gamblingsites.org for plenty more from these guys here. They've been Taylor Smith and Rick Rockwell. I'm Drew Goldfarb, and we will see you next week.